Affectionately nicknamed the Bat by its pilots, the Gtf Ulysses is a well-designed craft that has had a far longer useful life than its engineers ever imagined. Developed jointly by Terran and Vasudan contractors, the Ulysses was first deployed near the end of the Great War. Its excellent maneuverability and high top speed give it an agility that pilots love, but at a cost of thin armor and a small secondary weapon loadout. The Ulysses is a better choice for offensive missions than defensive ones. The old workhorse of the Terran fleet, the Hercules is a beloved but aging design. It was the mainstay of the Terran forces during the Great War, but it is slowly being phased out of the modern fleet. As they are replaced by Hercules, Myrmidons, and other recent designs, Hercules fighters are increasingly relegated to training and guard duties far from the front lines. Pilots who've flown Hercs for years love the ship's heavy armor and firepower and have learned to compensate for its low speed and poor maneuverability. The old Hercs are still widely used by NTF forces. The Gtf Hercules Mark II is the next generation of Terran heavy assault fighter. Introduced during the Great War, the original Herc's balance of firepower and maneuverability made it the most versatile strike fighter in the fleet. Some military historians have claimed the Hercules won the Great War, citing its deployment in key battles near the end of the Shivan conflict. Implementing recent advances in fusion drive technology, the Mark II improves the assault fighter's speed and maneuverability without sacrificing loadout capacity. The Gtf Ares class of fighters is a radical upgrade of the Hercules II fighter. The power plant has been completely replaced with the newer, more powerful Nancom Na-27F model. Depleted uranium shielding has been added atop critical subsystems, making the Ares harder to incapacitate. 2 primary weapon banks have been added, for greater firepower than the Herc II. This greater punch and protection come at a cost, however, as the Ares handles like a potato. Gtf Urani's craft are fresh off the drawing boards of Triton Dynamics. Though fast and heavily armored, their main attraction is firepower. With 8 primary banks and 2 secondary weapon bays, Urani's are at the top of the combat craft food chain. Both sets of weapon banks have been designed to maximize compatibility with the greatest possible number of weapon system. Urani's class ships are being evenly distributed through the GTVA fleet, but only elite pilots are currently authorized to fly them. The Gtf Loki is designated as a fighter, but it's more of a heavy reconnaissance craft. The Loki's micro-roughened hull and shielded exhaust chamber give it an extremely reduced profile to detection sensors. This makes it ideal for reconnaissance and infiltration missions that rely on stealth rather than firepower. Lacking the weaponry and armor to survive prolonged battles, the Loki can usually stay alive long enough for its high maneuverability and speed to discourage pursuers. Lokis are widely used by NTF forces. The Pegasus is used almost exclusively for reconnaissance missions. It's the fastest, most maneuverable ship in the Terran arsenal. The craft's contours and hull materials were carefully designed to minimize its profile to detection sensors. It is woefully armored and packs only minimal weaponry, making it a death box in a firefight. Pegasus pilots are a special breed of daredevils who pride themselves on getting into and out of situations that would be the death of other pilots, all without firing a shot. The Gtf Perseus is the newest fighter in the GTVA's arsenal. Slated to replace the aging Valkyrie as the Alliance's primary interceptor, the Perseus's high max speed and maneuverability make it ideal to hunt and destroy enemy bombers. Perseus fighters have been assigned to the 3rd Battle Group on a trial basis, with wide deployment expected after the OP eval period. Primary weapons include the Sdg Hl7 and Prometheus Cannon, with secondary loads of Harpoon and Hornet missiles. Preliminary results have shown the Perseus to be a superb fighter. RNI Systems Gtf Myrmidon replaces the Ulysses as the Alliance's primary space superiority fighter. The Myrmidon has received high marks for speed, maneuverability, armor, and loadout. An ultra-efficient hull configuration provides space for 3 secondary weapon systems, a first for Terran Bay Sudan fighters. This versatility enables Myrmidon squadrons to fulfill a range of combat roles, from light assault to heavy reconnaissance. In the Deneb system, the 53rd Hammerheads of the Gtd Aquitaine have demonstrated the effectiveness of the Myrmidon against NTF forces. The SF Mara class of Shivan fighters was first encountered by the GTC Vigilant while patrolling the Gamadra. The Gtb Artemis is the most agile bomber in the GTVA fleet, which makes it ideal for quick-hitting missions against warships and other slow targets. Of the same technological generation as the Boanerges class, the Artemis is less heavily armed and carries a lighter weapon payload, but it is significantly more maneuverable. While the Boanerges can inflict more damage, the Artemis can undertake, and return from, missions the slower Boanerges would have no hope of surviving. All Artemis-class bombers in the GVTA fleet are currently serving with the 2nd and 3rd battle groups. The Gtb Artemis DH is an experimental variant of the standard Artemis class. The most notable change is that the Artemis's factory-issued Han Ronald engines have been replaced by the same Nancom Na-27F power plant now found in the Gtf Ares fighter craft. The DH variant is faster and more maneuverable than the standard Artemis bomber, at no cost to armor or armament. During the OP eval period, Artemis DH bombers are being deployed in only select squadrons in different theaters of the war. If the evaluation trials go well, wider deployment of the Artemis DH class is expected. The Gtb Medusa is the workhorse of the GTVA's bomber fleet. Its large bomb capacity enables it to take out cruiser-class warships, while its strong shielding ensures it can get close enough to deliver the punch. The first bomber to carry the potent Cyclops bomb, the Medusa is sure to be one of the highlights of a bomber pilot's career. The Gtb Ursa is the slowest bomber in the GTVA fleet. What it lacks in speed, however, it more than makes up with its massive payload. The Ursa was the first GTVA bomber designed specifically to destroy capital ships. With a rack of Helios bombs, in addition to a standard complement of Hornet missiles and Prometheus cannon, a squadron of Ursas can take out a destroyer. Ursas have the highest shielding of any bomber, along with a GTVI-designed hyperdense hull. These help ensure that the Ursa gets close enough to deliver its payload and possibly even survive the escape. The Gtb Zeus is the fastest of all currently active GTVA bombers. It replaced the fleet's old Athena bombers as they were mothballed during the years following the Great War. Though slightly slower than the Athena, the Zeus's heavier armor and armament give it a much better battlezone survivability rate. Many of the Zeus wings in the GTVA fleet defected to the NTF during the initial stages of the rebellion. The new Gtb Boanerges has been assigned to elite bomber squadrons in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th Terran battle groups. The challenge of maintaining an aging fleet has motivated the GTVA to develop a new generation of ships able to withstand long-term abuse in the field. By maximizing shielding and payload, while offering enough maneuverability to make it a viable tactical unit, the Boanerges promises to remain in service for decades to come. One test pilot observed that the Boanerges handles better than any other bomber and has enough firepower to make it a formidable anti-cap ship weapon. The Gtdr Amazon Model 4 unmanned combat drone was once used for live basic combat training. They weren't tough, they weren't smart, and they weren't well armored. But they blew up very nicely. These drones are no longer manufactured, but their virtual counterparts are used in the Training Simulator Module, TSM, series. The Model 4 is every fighter pilot's first TSM opponent, the first mobile foe he faces during simulator courses. If you can't handle an Amazon during training, it's time to reconsider your choice of careers. The Gtdr Amazon Advanced Model 7 was an unmanned combat drone used for advanced flight combat training. It was larger, smarter, and more heavily armored than the basic Amazon drone. As with the basic Amazon, these are now encountered only in the virtual battlefields of the TSM Training Module series. The Model 7 is used to simulate assaults on enemy capital ships, training fighter and bomber pilots to target turrets and ship subsystems. Command has found that virtual training against Model VIIs increases the survival rate of pilots by 37% when attacking capital ships. The GTS Hygeia is the fleet's newest Terran support ship. It is fast and maneuverable, a necessity when trying to dock with fighters in the heat of battle. Triton Dynamics designed the Hygeia class with huge cargo bays for munitions storage, plus the latest magnetic stasis delivery system for quickly resupplying combat craft with missiles and bombs. The Hygeia's repair facilities are driven by neural net AI, for ultra-fast system diagnostics and repair. The high number of warheads carried by the Hygeia makes it a dangerous ship to be near when it blows up. The GTF Triton hauls almost twice the tonnage of the Poseidon-class freighters that have served the Alliance since the Great War. The ability to distribute supplies and munitions is vital in any theater of operations. With the Triton, battle groups can keep their forces well equipped, even if dispersed over multiple systems. The Triton not only has the ability to dock with and haul TAC units, but it also has an internal cargo bay for ship-to-ship transfers. The GTVA expects the Triton to reduce its reliance on deep space depots, which are vulnerable to attack and sabotage. TC Tri-containers are made by Triton Dynamics specifically to house fragile replacement parts for TD vessels that must be repaired in the field. Once these parts have been placed in storage at a repair facility, the GTVA reuses the containers in many capacities. The GTF Poseidon is the smaller of the two standard Terran military freighters. Though it carries only half as much cargo as the Triton, the Poseidon is more often chosen for dangerous missions. Its greater speed gives it better survivability on the front lines, as does the fact that it has 4 weapon turrets, compared to the Triton's 2. When Allied command sends supplies and munitions that have to get through, a Poseidon is usually chosen to transport them. The TC-2 is the standard issue cargo container in the GTVA for deep space cargo transport. Its thin hull will preserve Terran standard atmospheric conditions inside, as long as the hull seal has not been comprised by weapon fire or collision. TC-2 containers are cheap to manufacture and heavily used everywhere but the front lines, where the armored TAC-1 containers are employed, when available. The TSC-2 container is armored, providing more protection for its cargo than does the TC-2. This armor serves mainly to protect against hull breaches due to collisions, as it's not thick enough to provide much protection against enemy attacks. TSC-2s are used in busy supply depots in which collision damage is a hazard. The TAC-1 is a very heavily armored type of Terran cargo container. It is most often used to hold delicate or valuable cargoes. TAC-1s are generally found in frontline operations in which protection from enemy attacks is a primary consideration. The TTC-1 is a civilian cargo container modified for military use. It is a dense-hulled container originally designed to protect fragile technical and scientific equipment. The same protection is now used to guard against collision and attack damage to replacement ship subsystems and other electronic equipment intended for combat spacecraft. The GTC Fenris class is the aging stalwart among the Alliance's warships. Before the Great War, the Fenris was Terran Command's only class of cruisers. During the war, Terran Command decided to build a second line of cruisers, the Leviathans, to free the Fenris from escort and guard duties. Fenris cruisers have fought in virtually every theater of operation. These fast, versatile cruisers pack enough punch in their 260-meter-long hulls to go toe-to-toe with any enemy cruiser. The Fenris's speed and maneuverability make it a good choice for strike missions. Terrans developed the Gtm Hippocrates early in the post-war reconstruction period. With the outbreak of the NTF insurgency, the GTVA has once again called the Hippocrates into active military service. Its onboard facilities provide state-of-the-art medical care to thousands of patients. Hippocrates also helped transport refugees out of contested systems into the safety of Allied-controlled regions. The unusual design of the Hippocrates enables its crew to isolate sections of the ship quickly in the event of quarantine or hull breach. Early in the Great War, Han Ronald engineers designed and built the Leviathan class of cruisers. The Leviathan is much heavier armed and armored than the Fenris, but also much slower and less maneuverable. Leviathan cruisers are used to guard critical installations, such as permanent jump nodes, deep space factories, and gas mining operations, where firepower is king and speed is of little importance. They're also well suited to escorting slow-moving freighters or transports. The Fenris is good for fast-moving operations, but when you need some muscle, call in a Leviathan. The GTSC Faustus is primarily a class of civilian research vessels. During times of peace, they serve as mobile laboratories for scientists in many disciplines. During wartime, however, Faustus vessels are commandeered by the military, mostly for weapons research. It was on a Faustus ship, during the Great War, that Shivan shield technology was first reverse-engineered from a captured Shivan fighter. Faustus vessels have poor armor and only a few weak turrets for defense. Only desperate circumstances find a Faustus anywhere near the front lines. When a fighter pilot sees a ship of the GTG Zephyrus class, one thought flashes through his or her mind: thank God I don't have to fly that tub. The Zephyrus is a gas miner designed to harvest the gases of interstellar nebulae. It's the largest non-combatant ship in the GTVA fleet. The Zephyrus's thin armor, weak weaponry, and poor speed give it a very low survival rate in combat, so these ships stay well back from the front lines. Despite these weaknesses, the Zephyrus plays a critical role in the operation of the GTVA fleet. The deuterium gathered by Zephyrus ships powers the fleet's fusion drives. Ships of the Gda Charybdis class have been packed with the latest tachyon-enabled AWACS equipment from GTVI Labs. Each GTVA battle group has a squadron of Charybdis-class ships assigned to it. These ships double the range of the group's standard detection arrays. Charybdis ships' thin armor and weak defenses make them easy victims for enemy bombers. They have proven indispensable, however, in forays into the nebula beyond the Gnosis portal. Charybdis-class ships are very vulnerable in this environment, as witnessed by the recent loss of the Gda Panopticon from the 3rd Battle Group. For over 30 years, the GTD Orion class was the largest ship in the Terran Sudan Armada. Over 2 kilometers in length, bristling with dozens of death-dealing turrets, the Orion is as awesome in repose as it is in battle. All GVTA Orions have been retrofitted with the latest anti-warship beam weapons, as well as flak and AAA turrets for dealing with fighters and bombers. The Orion's cavernous hangar bays easily accommodate more than 24 fighter or bomber wings. The new GTD Hecate class of destroyers is replacing the Orion class as the flagship of Terran battle groups. More heavily armed than the Orion, the Hecate also carries over 150 combat spacecraft and a crew of 10,000. The GTD Aquitaine is a superb example of this new ship class, serving as the flagship of the Capella-based 3rd Fleet. The GTD Hades was a fusion of Terran and Shivan military technologies. It was constructed by Galactic Terran Intelligence, GDI, a rogue branch of the GDA. In 2335, GDI leaders sought to overthrow the provisional GDA government established in Delta Serpentis. After the defeat of the GDI and the destruction of the Hades, the GDA classified the details of this research at level Omega. There are rumors that the Alliance has attempted to reconstruct the Hades to learn more about the GDI's activities. These reports have yet to be confirmed by government sources. The Gdi Arcadia is a multi-purpose installation that has served the Terran fleet since the days of the Great War. Almost every major star system is host to at least one Arcadia, which is often used as a center for trade and communications. Home to scores of small ships, including repair vessels, fighters, and transports. An Arcadia installation is always a hub of intrasystem and interstellar traffic. An Arcadia is not an easy target for hostile forces, as it combines the firepower of over 20 weapon turrets with the ability to launch up to 10 wings of fighters from its fighterby. The Gtva Colossus resulted from an endeavor unprecedented in Terran or Vasudan history. This 6-kilometer-long behemoth is the result of 20 years of joint effort from dozens of contractors of both races. The Colossus is the most powerful spacefaring warship ever made, bristling with over 80 weapon turrets. It also houses 60 fighter and bomber wings and requires a crew of over 30,000. The firepower of the Colossus is greater than that of most GTVA battle groups. Deimos-class corvettes, such as the GTCV Actium and the GTCV Lysander, are the newest addition to the Terran fleet. These sleek, ultramodern warships are the products of a new era of ship design, maximizing maneuverability and firepower. Their hulls are strengthened with collapsed core molybdenum sheathing for better protection against beam fire, and their Vasudan-designed reactor core provides more energy per ton than any other Allied ship class. As the Leviathan and Fenris cruisers of the Great War are gradually phased out, these corvettes will become the foundation of tomorrow's fleet. The GTC Aeolus is the first cruiser class ever produced by the RNI shipyards orbiting Laramis II. Only 24 of these cruisers were put into service in GTVA fleets, with production ending in 2365. Allied command assigns Aeolus-class ships primarily to guard slow-moving convoys against fighter and bomber wings, as these cruisers are severely outgunned by most capital ships in service today. Their flak and AAA turrets serve as marvelous deterrents to smaller craft, however. The Iceni is the NTF command frigate, built under Admiral Bosch's direction at the Freedom shipyards in Polaris, captured by the Neo-Terran front at the start of their rebellion. With over 24 turrets and a sheath of ultra-dense depleted uranium shielding around its subsystems, the Iceni is an extremely tough nut to crack. With Bosch on board, providing tactical guidance, the Iceni is the equal of any GTVA battle group. Intelligence believes the ship was custom designed for a secret NTF project. Hidden NTF Asteroid Base. The Gtf Elysium class of transports has been in service for over 40 years. Its mission hasn't changed from the time of the Great War, to transport civilian and military personnel from one star system to another. The Elysium is very poorly armed, with a single Sdg Hl7 cannon, and also suffers from thin armor plating. Only desperate circumstances find Elysiums anywhere near the front lines. Assaults and dangerous transport missions handled almost exclusively by the much tougher Gtf Argo class. The Gtf Argo has become the standard military transport vehicle for the Terran fleet. Argos sometimes carry new weapon and combat craft prototypes to and from testing grounds or to frontline deployment positions. Military VIPs occasionally commandeer Argos to travel from star system to star system in some semblance of comfort. Argos are most often used as assault transports, carrying squads of Marines through heavy flak to board enemy vessels that command has decided to capture rather than destroy. The Gdi Ganymede is the Alliance's newest repair and resupply facility. Ganymede installations are currently deployed behind the front lines in the Vega, Vasuda, and Capella systems. Each Ganymede can service up to 5 warships simultaneously. Repairs of any type or degree can be made here, on any ship in the GTVA fleet. Ganymedes also provide retrofitting services, enabling Allied command to extend the lifetime of aging ships by upgrading weaponry, systems, and engines. The Subspace Portal was discovered in the Gamma Draconis system in 2367. The interlocking circular motions of its components apparently create a subspace vortex that connects the Gamma Draconis system to another part of our universe. Dr. Hargrave's team continues to study the device, though their findings are highly classified. The GTSG Watchdog was the first generation of Terran Sentry platform, the distant precursor to the Cerberus and Alastor platforms. Seriously underpowered by today's standards, the Watchdog also suffers from paper-thin armor. Many Watchdogs are Great War relics left active and in place because it wasn't worthwhile removing or deactivating them. The NTF occasionally uses stolen Watchdogs to guard supply depots or minor installations. Until the advent of the GTSG Alastor, the GTSG Cerberus was the most advanced sentry gun emplacement available to Terran forces. They were vital to Terran defenses during the Great War, racking up over 100 kills of Vasudan and Shivan combat craft. But the current conflict has found them primarily in backline roles, guarding installations deemed relatively safe from attack. With no mobility and only 2 Sdg Hl7 turrets, they serve as more of a distraction than a viable threat to modern combat craft. GTSG Alastor sentry gun platforms can be dropped by warships to cover a retreat, or they can be used to strengthen firepower around strategic locations. While Alastors alone cannot hold a position against more than a few fighters, complementing them with a warship and several wings of fighters presents an exemplary defense against all but the most determined foes. 2 Bessemer cone cannon turrets on opposing sides of the platform give the Alastor a full field of fire. The turrets are controlled by the latest neural net cyber AI to track multiple targets simultaneously. The Gtep Hermes Escape Pod is now standard equipment on every GTVA warship of cruiser size or larger. Each ship has several escape pods magnetically coupled to airlocks scattered around the ship's outer hull. Not intended for whole crew evacuations, the Hermes has space for up to 20 crew members. Each pod is propelled by a small fusion engine, enough to remove the pod from the immediate vicinity of an exploding warship. It is also capable of subspace jumps. The TC Meson bomb is used solely as a container for Meson bomb deployments. Each is custom built specifically to hold a Meson bomb. The container is permanently sealed once the bomb is safely housed within it. The solidly built Gvf Seth is a versatile Great War-era fighter that still performs dual roles as bomber escort and bomber interceptor. The Seth's relatively slow cruising speed is deceptive, as its Miku Hl7 plasma power plant can give it an incredible afterburner boost, more than doubling its velocity. A total of 6 weapon banks and a wide variety of loadouts give the Seth the needed punch to eliminate incoming bombers quickly. The Gvf Horus was the fastest fighter class during the Great War and it's still the fastest fighter in the GTVA fleet. Its weapon capacity is average for a fighter, with 4 primary banks and 2 missile bays. The Horus pays for its speed and maneuverability with thin armor and relatively weak shields. The Horus shines as a bomber interceptor, a role Allied command puts it in as often as possible. For offensive operations against well-defended targets, however, the Horus is a poor choice. The Gvf Thoth has been manufactured exclusively in the Saar Corps shipyards at Altair for over 40 years. During the heyday of the Hammer of Light, the Hall captured these yards and the Thoth became a primary fighter among Hall forces. When these shipyards were recaptured, the Thoth once again became an important component of the Vasudan Navy. In the hands of a skilled pilot, the Thoth's maneuverability and small size make it a hard target to hit. A single missile bank means that a Thoth pilot relies on his primary weapons to make most kills. Fast and highly maneuverable, the Gvf Serapis is primarily used as a bomber interceptor. Its thin armor and weak shields give it a low survival rate in dogfights against more heavily armored fighters. Despite having only 2 primary and secondary weapon banks, the Serapis has been retrofitted to accommodate almost any loadout in the GTVA arsenal. Veteran Vasudan pilots love the Serapis for its agility and loadout options. Some Terran pilots who've been privileged enough to fly it claim to prefer it to any Terran fighter. The Gvf turret is replacing the Seth as the Vasudan's heavy assault fighter. While integrating cutting-edge technology developed in collaboration with the Terrans, the turret boasts a distinctly Vasudan design. Its unusual configuration was inspired by the Apsu Hak, a creature that once inhabited the deserts of Vasuda Prime. The Opsuhek has become an emblem of the Vasudan diaspora, and the turret continues the tradition of symbolic design. Armed with 4 gun mounts and 2 missile banks, the turret has the speed and firepower to challenge both fighters and warships. The Gvb Comet is a Shivan design that was initially adapted to Vasudan needs by Hammer of Light engineers. The version currently in use was further modified by technicians at Miku Enterprises. Sporting 4 primary weapon banks and 3 missile/bomb bays, the Comet packs a massive punch. Add in a top speed that surpasses that of some fighters and an ultra-dense molybdenum armor plating, and it's easy to see why the Comet is the favorite bomber among Vasudan pilots. The Gvb Osiris was the primary bomber of the PVN during the Great War. It is showing its age during the current conflict, as the more advanced Baka and Comet bombers have replaced it on the front lines in most theaters of conflict. Osiris bombers still in service have been retrofitted to make them compatible with most GTVA missiles and bombs. If well protected by fighter escorts, a wing of Osiris bombers can still wreak havoc on enemy cruisers and corvettes. Learning a lesson from the bomber losses of the Great War, Vasudan defense contractor Akiton designed the Gvb Baka, a fast, agile bomber that could still deliver a warship-shattering payload. The Baka's dual OC-12 engines are baffled and masked, giving it a small profile for heat-seeking missiles. The bomber's speed and maneuverability make it the craft of choice for taking out destroyers and corvettes with multiple flak, AAA, and anti-ship beam turrets. Over 6,000 Bakas have been produced in the orbiting shipyards around Vasuda Prime. The stealth prototype Gvf was a top-secret development project assigned to Vasudan conglomerate Akiton Corp designed to be invisible to standard detection arrays mounted on combat craft. TAs have performed admirably during their OP eval period. The masking materials and blending technologies used across their outer surfaces seem to confuse Shivan detection systems as well. The TA is currently available only to select fighter units in the Vasudan Navy, with no word on when they will be more widely distributed. The GVS Nephthys is the Vasudan's new support ship. It is fast and maneuverable, a necessity when trying to dock with fighters in the heat of battle. Miku Enterprises built a cargo bay into the rear of the ship, enabling it to carry extra supplies and munitions during emergencies. Miku Enterprises licensed the GTS Hygea's magnetic stasis delivery system from Triton Dynamics, so both ships are equally adept at resupplying combat craft with missiles and bombs. The high number of warheads carried by the Nephthys makes it a dangerous ship to be near when it blows up. The GVT Isis is most often used as a military personnel transport but also occasionally serves as a repair ship or even a tugboat, helping to maneuver large vessels into docking bays. 2 cannon turrets and thick molybdenum plating serve to protect its cargo. Magnetic cargo locks located on the Isis's undercarriage enable it to transport small cargo containers of supplies and munitions in emergencies. The Ma'at freighter class has served the Vasudan Navy for over 50 years. More than 200 of these vessels still serve the GTVA, carrying desperately needed supplies, foodstuffs, and munitions to every theater of the war. With only 3 weapon turrets, a lone Ma'at is easy prey for a wing of enemy bombers. Thus Ma'ats usually travel in mixed convoys with other freighters, guarded by cruisers and fighter wings. For the past 20 years, the Gvf Arbes has been the mainstay of Vasudan shipping fleets. While some Terran systems languished in the post-war era, the Vasudans experienced an economic recovery that was miraculous, given the annihilation of their home planet. Experts credit the policies of the restored imperial government that emerged following Khonsa II's dissolution of the Vasudan parliament. As commerce among the Vasudan systems resumed and expanded into Terran worlds, a new generation of spacefaring cargo vessels was required to meet the needs of this burgeoning economy. The Vasudan VAC-5 is an armored cargo container that is used to transport fragile or valuable equipment to frontline bases. These containers are better protected than most combat spacecraft, giving their cargoes an excellent chance to survive collisions and stray energy blasts. The Vasudan VAC-4 is an armored cargo container that is used to transport fragile or valuable equipment to frontline bases. These containers are better protected than most combat spacecraft, giving their cargoes an excellent chance to survive collisions and stray energy blasts. When the first Satis-class freighter was encountered by Terran forces during the Terran-Vasudan War, its firepower led Terran Command to classify it as a light cruiser. Only after a disabled Satis was captured did its true nature become known. Now designated the Gvf Ursa class, these freighters still serve as an iron fist within the velvet glove of a freighter convoy. Few enemy fighters who mistake a Satis for a Ma'at or Bes live to regret their error. The GVG Anuket was originally designed for resource extraction in the volatile environment of gas giants. More recently, the Anuket has been modified for nebular operations. The Anuket has the most sophisticated sensor array available, enabling it to navigate the intense maelstroms of supernova remnants. In the nebula, the Anuket plays two important roles. First, the miner collects samples for scientific analysis and serves as a laboratory for field experiments. Second, the Anuket gathers deuterium-rich gas for use in the fusion drives that power the Allied fleet. The GVC Aten is among the smallest of the GTBA's cruiser classes, with thin armor and only a few, relatively weak turrets. Terran fighters and bombers exploited these weaknesses during the early years of the Great War, when the Terrans and Vasudans were still enemies. The Aten is most often seen in the current conflict as a rearguard defense for convoys or installations, backing up wings of fighters and bombers. The GVC Menta Cruiser is the lightest of the new Vasudan warships. Following the Great War, Allied scientists developed the beam cannons that now serve as the primary armaments of today's GTBA warships. Rather than modify existing ships, the Vasudans developed new designs to mount these weapons. The Menta's 16 turrets include heavy beam cannons for duking it out with other warships, as well as AAA and flak turrets to fend off smaller craft. The GVC Somtus and the GVC Myserinus recently demonstrated the strength of the Mentu against NTF forces in Epsilon Pegasi. Design of the Corvette-class GVCV Sobek began in the dark days after the destruction of Vasuda Prime by the Shivans in the Great War. The Vasudan Navy wanted a vessel that could single-handedly counter powerful Shivan cruisers and provide critical support to Vasudan destroyers in battles against Shivan capital ships. The Sobek class fills those requirements admirably. Bristling with almost 24 turrets, these corvettes are a terror to all vessels of cruiser size and below, while presenting a dire threat even to ships far larger than themselves. The GVD Typhon was the height of Vasudan military technology when it appeared to face Terran forces during the early days of the Terran-Vasudan War. The first Typhon was sighted at the Vega engagement and quickly destroyed the GTD Eisenhower and much of the 4th Fleet. The more recent Hatshepsut class of destroyers is larger and wields a deadlier array of armaments, but the Typhon is still a match for almost any foe. Up to 30 wings of fighters or bombers can be housed within its docking bays, ready to engage at a moment's notice. The GVSG Ankh Sentry gun platform is the Vasudan equivalent of the GTSG Watchdog. Both are Great War relics that perform poorly by modern standards. The Ankh serves to guard backline storage depots and installations. With no armor or shielding, the Ankh is easily destroyed. Its two small turrets can deter unarmed raiders or badly damaged fighters, but it poses little threat to most combat craft. When the GTVA asked the Vasudan Navy to upgrade the Great War-era Ankh Sentry gun platform, the GVSG Ejo was the Vasudan's answer. The Ejo has significantly more armor plating than the Ankh, improving its survivability, but the Vasudans placed only one small cannon turret on the new platform, giving it half the punch of the Ankh. After seeing the Ejo, the Terrans quietly began developing their own advanced sentry gun platforms. The Vasudan Navy seems content to leave this aspect of military technology to the Terrans. The Gvep Hermes Escape Pod has been the standard emergency vehicle on Vasudan capital ships since the Terran-Vasudan War. In keeping with Vasudan philosophies, the RA is almost never used to evacuate personnel, but instead is employed to preserve records and other data that could be of use to the Allies. Thus our A-class craft have minimal life support systems and a small fusion engine. The energy supplied by the escape pod's power plant goes almost entirely to powering the pod's homing beacon. The GVA Sdg is the Vasedan class of AWACS vessels, comparable to the Terran Gda Charybdis class. Sdgs are smaller, less heavily armored, and have half the turrets of Charybdis ships. Despite these shortcomings, the Vasedan Navy insists upon deploying Sdgs in Vasedan battle groups, claiming the Vasedan versions are more appropriate for their fleets. Sdgs crystalline detection arrays provide their fleets with doubled radar range within the nebular region. Every Vasedan battle group operating in this theater has a wing of Sdgs attached to it. In 2360, Allied Command commissioned the first of the GVD Hatshepsut class destroyers. The Vasedan contractor Akitone designed the Hatshepsut to efficiently integrate the new beam cannon. The process of retrofitting the older Typhon-class warships yielded vessels prone to system failures and reactor overloads. Though a handful of modified Typhons remain in service, the Hatshepsut has taken over as the primary Vasedan destroyer. With 24 turrets, 5 beam cannons, and 2 fighterboats, destroyers such as GVD Samtik of Deneb's 13th Battle Group serve at the vanguard of the modern Vasedan fleet. The Shivan Fighter Class SF Dragon is a fast, extremely agile craft. Its twin lasers pack a deadly punch. The Dragon's weakness seems to be a thin hull. The trouble is that their speed and maneuverability make them extremely difficult to hit. The SF Basilisk is a Shivan heavy attack fighter. Slow but heavily armed and well protected, the Basilisk targets slower moving vessels, such as bombers, freighters, and gas miners. Their powerful lasers make them a danger to all such craft, so they must be engaged and destroyed as quickly as possible. The Menta Cruiser fighter is the fastest known craft in the Shivan Armada. With a single, powerful laser and 2 missile banks, it is a dangerous offensive weapon. Its Achilles heel lies in its thin hull and weak shields. Menta Cruisers do not last long in dogfights against other fighters. They prefer to target bombers, which are nearly helpless against the Menta Cruiser's speed and weaponry. The SF Ishma is a relatively rare, and only recently encountered, class of Shivan fighter. It appears to be a heavy attack fighter, like the Basilisk. With a low known top speed, Ishmas seem to target slower moving vessels, such as bombers, freighters, and gas miners. Their powerful lasers make them a danger to all such craft, so they must be engaged and destroyed as quickly as possible. The SF Mara class of Shivan fighters was first encountered by the GTC Vigilant while patrolling the Gamma Draconis jump node in the Capella system. All other information concerning the Mara is classified level Psi. First encountered in Gamma Draconis, the SF Asteroth is a fast, agile fighter that appears to have achieved its maneuverability at the expense of its armor and weaponry. Once the shields of an Asteroth are down, the fighter can be dispatched quickly. The SB Nephilim is the slowest of the Shivan bomber classes. These craft were first encountered during the Great War and are still found in many Shivan attack formations. Nephilims are heavily armored and shielded, enabling them to deliver their devastating payloads despite their lack of speed. The SB Torvi is a Shivan vessel that has only recently been encountered. The Torvi is one of the weaker Shivan bomber classes, but still the equal of every bomber in the GTBA arsenal. Not as maneuverable as a Nahima, nor as tough as a Seraphim or Nephilim, the Torvi appears to be a Shivan compromise between speed and power. Either the SB Nahima class is a new Shivan bomber design, or the Shivans are finally taking the GTBA seriously and bringing in their best ships. The Nahima is considered to be the Shivan's most dangerous bomber. It has demonstrated the ability to outrun virtually every fighter in the GTBA fleet. Its powerful laser banks and high-capacity missile bays make it a threat to combat craft of all types, as well as to capital ships. The SB Seraphim is a familiar foe to GTBA forces. They appear to be similar to Nephilims in speed, armor, and shield strength, but have demonstrated a larger bomb capacity. Encountered on rare occasions since the Shivans first entered the Great War, the St. Azrael is the only known class of Shivan transport. Little is known about it even now, but it is believed to house many Shivans within its thin hulls. Since Azraels might be carrying Shivan pilots or other skilled crew members, it is always worthwhile to eliminate these lightly defended ships. The SFR Dis class of freighters is smaller than the Asmodeus class and not as well armed. It is still much more dangerous to attack than the GTVA's Triton or Poseidon freighters, however. The SAC-3 is the most common Shivan cargo container found thus far. Its thin plating is barely enough to maintain the interior atmospheric integrity against the vacuum of space. As no additional effort was made to armor these containers against attack, it is assumed that only items of low value or importance are carried within. Nevertheless, standing orders are to capture these containers at every opportunity, unless mission orders specifically dictate otherwise. The SFR Mephisto class is equivalent to the Dis class in size and combat capabilities. Given their wildly different configurations, they must serve different purposes for the Shivans, but Allied intelligence currently offers no further information on this matter. The SC-5 class of Shivan cargo container is functionally identical to the SAC-3 class, as far as GTVA engineers have been able to determine. As with all Shivan cargo containers, standing orders are to capture at every opportunity, unless mission orders specifically dictate otherwise. Little is known about the SFR Asmodeus line of freighters. With a strong hull and 4 weapon turrets, they are the most dangerous Shivan freighters to attack. Nothing is known of the cargo Asmodeus freighters commonly carry. The SAC-2 is a heavily armored variant of the standard Shivan cargo container. Equipment found in captured SAC-2s appears to be more fragile than that found in the more common SAC-3s. SAC-2 cargo containers are to be captured rather than destroyed at every opportunity. If the choice is between destruction and allowing the container to be recovered by Shivan forces, pilots are authorized to destroy the container. The SC Lilith class of Shivan cruisers is a far deadlier foe than the Cain class. Nearly impenetrable armor plating enables it to withstand tremendous punishment, enabling its 9 turrets to lash out at warships and combat spacecraft with impunity. Though not as thickly armored as the Lilith class, the SC Rakshasa class of Shivan cruisers is far deadlier. With over a dozen turrets, the Rakshasa is the most heavily armed Shivan cruiser class. It was a Rakshasa cruiser that destroyed the GTC Vigilant at the Gamma Draconis node in the Capella system. The weakest of the Shivan cruiser classes is designated SC Cain. These vessels were commonly encountered during Great War battles. Cains are considered to be slightly stronger than the GTC Fenris cruiser class. The SD Demon class of Shivan destroyers is much smaller than the Lucifer class but very heavily armed and extremely dangerous. Demons are known to carry numerous wings of fighters and bombers. The SD Ravana is a destroyer class GTVA forces have only recently encountered. It appears to be tasked with clearing out smaller foes, a mission for which it is well suited. It eagerly wipes out wings of fighters and bombers and also overwhelms cruisers and corvettes. The SD Lucifer was a massive super-destroyer that led the Shivan Armada in the Great War. No weapon in the Allied arsenal could penetrate the Lucifer's shields. In the Altair system, Vasudan scientists uncovered ancient artifacts that explained how to track ships into subspace, where the Lucifer's shields would not function. A desperate mission to attack the Lucifer in subspace succeeded. But the explosion of the Lucifer collapsed the Soul Jump node, severing all contact with Earth. The victory over the Lucifer effectively ended the Shivan invasion. The SSG Trident line of Sentry gun platforms is well known from numerous encounters during the Great War. These are still used to guard Shivan installations, but many of the stronger Belial platforms have been deployed to the most critical defensive positions. The SSG Belial Sentry gun platform appears to be a radical redesign of the Trident platform that was first encountered during the Great War. Pilots who have encountered both report that the Belial is harder to kill. It is reliably known that the Belial has twice as many laser turrets as the Trident Sentry gun. Both types are used to guard storage depots, gas miners, and other Shivan installations. Almost nothing is known of the Rahu line of gas miners. It is assumed that they function in much the same way as our Zephyrus miners, funneling nebular gas into internal machinery that fractionates it into its molecular components for further processing. Rahu miners are armed with heavy laser turrets, so care must be taken when attacking them. Only one class of Shivan ship is classified as a corvette, the SCV Moloch class. Though they're physically as large as the GTCV Deimos class, Molochs do not seem to pack the same punch. They are far more deadly than any Shivan cruisers, however. Very little is known about the SJ Sathanas class. This juggernaut seems comparable in strength to the GTBA Colossus. All intelligence concerning the Sathanas has been classified level Upsilon. The GTSC Mjolnir is the most advanced sentry gun device known. Vastly tougher and deadlier than the earlier Watchdog, Cerberus, and Alastor models, the Mjolnir is a danger to any hostile fighter or bomber that comes within range. Its 2 beam weapons and 3 missile banks enable it to take on multiple bogies simultaneously. Mjolnirs are also referred to as RBCs, remote beam cannons. They are used to help protect the most vital frontline alliance installations. The Subakinus Hl7 is a Zazer weapon, firing an intense, highly focused beam of X-ray emissions. Until the Shivans appeared with their shield technology, these weapons were considered an unnecessary and costly extravagance. But Great War dogfights against Shivan craft quickly taught the Allies that their ships didn't stand a chance unless they could punch through shields. The HL7 works superbly against shields of all varieties and has become the standard issue primary weapon for all Terran fighters and bombers. The Miku Hl7 is the Vasudan re-engineered variant of the Subak Hl7 Zazer. Modifications made to the design by engineers at Miku give it a higher firing rate and longer range than the original Terran version. These improvements come at the cost of a slight decrease in power output. This trade-off fits well with Vasudan military tactics, but most Terran pilots prefer the performance of the original weapon. The Vasudan-made Akitone Sdg Advanced Disruptor was a direct result of the phenomenal success of Gda disruption weaponry in the Great War. The GTW-41X Advanced Disruptor subsequently underwent a retrofit and was pushed into mass production. With the exception of the Subak HL7, more SDG units have been produced by the GTVA than any other weapon in history. The SDG is notorious for its demanding power requirements. The GTW ML70 Morningstar improves upon the performance of the flail gun, which was developed during the Great War. The original flail was too expensive to mass produce, because of its limited usage/effectiveness profile. Recent advances in high-temperature optics enable the main focusing chamber of the Morningstar to produce a much more coherent beam, increasing its range and damage levels. This comes at the expense of somewhat higher energy requirements, however. The GTW-5 Prometheus R is a modified version of the original Prometheus weapon. With the link to Earth severed, the GTVA had been unable to obtain sufficient quantities of argon, a required element in the Prometheus's power generation module, to continue to manufacture the standard Prometheus. GTVA engineers modified the original design to incorporate some of the advanced electromagnetic mechanisms of the Banshee. The technology has not been perfected, however, and the Prometheus R suffers from a long recharge cycle and high energy requirements. The original GTW-5 Prometheus S was removed from service when the link to Earth was lost and the GTVA was unable to obtain sufficient quantities of argon, a required element in the Prometheus's power generation module. Recent deployment of Anuket and Zephyrus gas miners has enabled us to resume production of the GTW-5 Prometheus S. The S-type is a minor variant of the original Prometheus laser cannon. The S-type's faster recharge cycle and lower energy drain cause many pilots to prefer it over the R variant. Reconstruction efforts after the Great War inspired advancements in metallurgy and efficient conventional explosives. The two are elegantly combined in the GTW-66 Maxim. The Maxim is by definition an energy weapon, though it behaves like a high-velocity mass driver cannon, accelerating uranium slugs along its smooth-bore barrel. The Maxim has a difficult time penetrating energy-based shields, but it has a devastating effect on hull plating and subsystem armor. The GTW UD-8 Kaiser is the result of an intensive study of Shivan weapon technology. The Kaiser emits focused waves of subatomic particles that bombard its target. Impact causes the wave function of the particles to collapse and emit extremely intense, zero-point energy microbursts. Standard policy dictates that weapons of this magnitude be mounted only on bombers, but it has become common practice for field technicians to mount them on fighters. Derived from advanced electromagnetic weaponry, such as the Banshee, the GTW-19 Ursa disrupts shield systems by focusing a barrage of widely varying M harmonics upon its target. This energy is completely ineffective against any kind of armor plating or insulated subsystem. For this reason, the Ursa is most effective when paired with a hull-damaging partner, such as the Maxim or Prometheus. The GTW-83 Lamprey Cannon is a second-generation leech gun. It drains the energy systems of its target, depleting the reserves available to the target's primary weapons, shields, and engines. Coupled with a weapon that pummels both hull and shields, the Lamprey is highly effective against enemy fighters and bombers. The Gtm Mx-64 Rocket is a faster, more accurate, larger payload version of the MX-50 that was in service at the beginning of the Great War. The missile developed as a result of experimentation by engineers at some of STX Exploration's most isolated mining operations, in the systems of Hermes and Leviathan 726BA. Advances in remote-controlled explosive devices were used by GTBA engineers to improve the old MX-50S. The heat-seeking Mx-64 Rocket is now a standard loadout for Terran fighter craft. The Gtm Mx-6 Tempest improves upon its predecessor, the Fury missile. Faster and more deadly than the Fury, the Tempest is also smaller, enabling flight crews to load more into each secondary weapon bay. The Tempest is a dumbfire missile, moving in a straight line from its point of release. The missile detonates when it strikes a solid object or when it reaches its effective range of approximately 600 meters. Tempests are best used at close range. With a velocity of 360 m/s, nothing outruns a Tempest. The GTM-4 Hornet was showing its age even toward the end of the Great War, but it was cheap to manufacture. As a result, wartime production of the Hornet ran full tilt at factories in 8-star systems right up to the end of the war. After hostilities ceased, the GTBA found itself with an inventory of 2.6 million Hornet missiles. This stockpile has been spread among all GTBA battle groups, with each receiving at least 100,000 Hornets. This aspect-seeking missile still delivers a devastating 4-missile punch, which makes it a consistent favorite of many pilots. The GTM-4 Tornado is an upgrade to the Hornet missile. With improved fire control systems and guidance computers, the Tornado can be fired more rapidly and with greater accuracy than the Hornet. Though physically smaller than its predecessor, the Tornado launcher fires more rockets per volley, delivering a more devastating punch. Be advised that a Tornado missile will fail to arm its payload properly if aspect lock has not been achieved before firing. The GTM-19 Harpoon is the most sophisticated weapon in the GTBA arsenal. Not only is it the fastest aspect-seeking missile used by the fleet, but advanced fuzzy logic circuitry enables it to gain lock faster than any other missile in its class. The missile's warhead is wrapped in a shell of ultra-dense depleted uranium, ensuring maximum penetration into the hull of its target before the warhead detonates. The new GTM-55 trebuchet was developed as a long-range, anti-bomber missile with an effective range of 4,000 meters. It also utilizes the latest in precision targeting technology for short lock times. The trebuchet plays a vital role in defensive missions, enabling escort and patrol fighters to intercept incoming bombers without straying from the ship or emplacement under attack. The Taga missile was conceived during the GTVI's top-secret stealth technology research projects. The missile was manufactured and swiftly pressed into service as a means of counteracting the sensor-disrupting effects of the recently discovered Knossos Nebula. Upon impact with a hard surface, the Taga missile adheres and activates a small, short-lived electronic beacon. This beacon is powered by a small fuel cell with a usable lifetime of several seconds. During this time, it broadcasts location and targeting information to all friendly ships within range. The TAGB is an enhanced version of the standard Taga missile, also developed by GTVI Laboratories. With a more shock-resistant substructure around its electronics package, the TAGB is packed with ultra-sophisticated equipment to provide more useful targeting information to friendly forces. Massive retrofitting of GTVA ship turrets is underway to fully utilize this improved targeting technology. A third-generation version of the old Synaptic and Havoc missiles, the GTM-10 Piranha provides bombers with a high-explosive anti-fighter screen. The Piranha is detonated remotely by pressing the secondary weapon trigger a second time. This releases over a dozen small, heat-seeking missiles that attack any enemy vessel within range. This function makes the missile effective against incoming wings of fighters in close formation. The Piranha is now the standard-issue defensive weapon for bombers attacking targets protected by close fighter cover. The GTM-43 Stiletto 2 improves upon the original Stiletto's design with higher acceleration and maximum velocity, better guidance system, and greater range. The Stiletto 2, like its predecessor, is designed to incapacitate the subsystems of capital ships, homing in on the M signature of the currently targeted subsystem. The GTM-11 Inferno is an area effect bomber suppression weapon, often employed to knock out incoming waves of slow-moving bombers. Upon detonation, the Inferno releases multiple submunitions that contain ultra-high explosive charges. The Inferno is detonated remotely by pressing the secondary weapon trigger a second time. A HUD indicator displays the distance from the warhead to the firing ship. If the pilot triggers the detonation too early, he risks being caught in the Inferno's extensive blast radius. The GTM-12 Cyclops has been in service for over 15 years in the GTVA arsenal. It is the standard ultra-high delivery secondary weapon loadout, utilizing the latest in aspect-seeking guidance technologies. The Cyclops has the distinction of being the most consistently upgraded weapon in the fleet. Although its development began shortly after the Great War ended, its excellent performance has kept it firmly entrenched in the role of main assault weapon. Its payload is approximately 50% greater than that of the older Tsunami warheads. The GTM-13 Helios is the product of an entire generation of high-energy physics research, based primarily at the GTVA Particle Accelerator Complex near Antares. The most powerful warhead in the fleet's arsenal, the Helios generates a massive shockwave from the cataclysmic annihilation of matter and antimatter, triggered upon impact with its target. Each bank of Helios warheads can fire only once every 30 seconds. The Helios is prohibitively expensive to produce, thus its deployment is severely restricted. The GTM-14 Electromagnetic Pulse Advanced Warhead interferes with the electronics systems of vessels caught within its blast radius. This renders the affected ships unable to track targets, manage communications, or gain aspect missile lock. Tactically, the GTM-14 is a very effective anti-bomber weapon, as it also temporarily shuts down the guidance and propulsion systems of warheads in flight. This advanced version of the standard M-Pulse missile disrupts subsystems at a deeper circuitry level, resulting in a longer-lasting effect. In 2335, the Terran Vasidan War entered its 14th year. The Galactic Terran Alliance, GDA, and the Parliamentary Vasidan Navy, PVN, were both exhausted, demoralized, and on the verge of internal collapse. The invasion of a mysterious species, designated the Shivans, compelled Terran and Vaesidan leaders to sign an armistice and form a new alliance. Using advanced weaponry and shields, the Shivans attacked without provocation and without warning. The Allies acquired and developed new technologies to confront the menace. At the vanguard of the Shivan armada was the SD Lucifer, a massive super-destroyer. The Lucifer exterminated all life on Vaesida Prime and set course for Earth. No weapon in the Allied arsenal could penetrate the Lucifer's shields. In the Altair system, Vaesidan scientists uncovered the ruins of an extinct civilization destroyed by the Shivans 8,000 years ago. The artifacts explained how to track the Lucifer into subspace where its shields would not function. In subspace, the Lucifer could be destroyed. From the Delta Serpentis system, a squadron launched from the Gtd Bastion pursued the Lucifer into the Soul Jump node. These fighters and bombers had to destroy the Lucifer's reactors before the super-destroyer extinguished all life on Earth. According to declassified transmissions, the mission succeeded. However, the explosion of the Lucifer created a subspace cataclysm that collapsed the Soul Jump node, severing all contact between Earth and the other systems of Terran Vaesidan space. By the end of 2335, the Great War was over. The victory over the Lucifer had dealt the decisive blow. Incapable of coordinated strikes or strategic planning, the Shivans were outmaneuvered, isolated, and gradually destroyed. However, both species faced the challenge of rebuilding their interstellar societies from the ground up. An ill-fated coup d'état, orchestrated by the rogue intelligence branch of the Gda, marked the beginning of post-war factional politics. With its economy in ruins and political structures in turmoil, the Galactic Terran Alliance disintegrated into semi-autonomous regional blocks, each with its own agenda. The major entities included the Adhara Coalition, the Antares Federation, the Regulus Syndicate, and the Leviathan New Alliance. As these groups consolidated and stabilized, the reconstruction gained momentum, and the resumption of open commerce rekindled the notion of a pan-Terran community. Despite the annihilation of all life in their home system, the success of the Vaesidan reconstruction surpassed that of their Terran allies. The Vaesidans were governed by a parliament until 2339, when the Vaesidan Emperor, Khonsa II, dissolved this body and formed a new government, bringing an end to an institution notorious for its Byzantine treachery, corruption, and arrogance. The heir of a 10,000-year dynasty, Khonsa distinguished himself as a leader of unusual acumen and wisdom. Economists credit the Khonsa regime for the miraculous rehabilitation of Vaesidan industry and society. The Galactic Terran Vaesidan Alliance, GTVA, was formed in 2345, 10 years after the Great War. This treaty organization recognized the autonomy of its constituents as it provided a framework for trade and mutual defense. The Great War had transformed the enmity between Terrans and Vaesidans into a lasting fellowship. As the industry and economy of the Terran Vaesidan systems recovered, support for a more powerful GTVA gained momentum. In 2358, delegates signed into existence the Beta Aquili Convention, BETAC, named after the system where the Constitution was drafted and ratified. BETAC dismantled the governments of the Terran blocs and recognized the General Assembly, the Security Council, and the Vaesidan Imperium as the supreme authorities of Terran Vaesidan space. Under BETAC, the Vaesidans and the Terrans maintain separate fleets under a single command structure. A warship is designated GT or GV, indicating whether it is Galactic Terran or Galactic Vaesidan. The two species openly exchange information and technology, and the most recent fighters and bombers can be modified to accommodate pilots of either species. Technically, BETAC is but one of a series of conventions and treaties that define how the GTVA functions as a political, military, and economic entity. However, the significance of BETAC as the cornerstone of the Terran Vaesidan Alliance has made it the favored target of NTF propagandists. In 2335, the destruction of the Lucifer super-destroyer collapsed the Sol jump node in Delta Serpentis, severing all contact with Earth. The fate of the Terran home planet remains open to speculation, though a number of scenarios are possible. As the center of an interstellar community, Earth could not survive in isolation without a radical transformation of its political and economic structures. On this point, there is no disagreement. However, the question remains whether this transition occurred peacefully or whether Terran society collapsed into anarchy. Strong arguments have been advanced for both sides. For generations, Earth had been the political, economic, and cultural center of Terran civilization. Humans still measured time in hours, days, months, and years. They named their ships after the mythological figures of ancient Terran civilizations, and systems were still identified according to the constellations observed from Earth. The planet served as capital of the Gda, and the bulk of the Terran industrial base was located in the Sol system. Off-worlders identified their nationality according to the old Earth boundaries, though nation-states dissolved after the discovery of subspace and the emergence of an interstellar Terran society. Though necessity has diminished Earth's practical importance in the post-war era, discovering the means to return home remains a high priority. 18 months ago, Admiral Akin Bosch, commander of the GTVA 6th Fleet, launched a violent military coup in the Polaris system. Within weeks, a regional domino effect also toppled the governments of Regulus and Sirius, all swearing allegiance to Bosch and his Neo-Terran front. Bosch's vision of Neo-Terra informs the ideology of his movement. Though Terrans have lived in exile from Earth since the end of the Great War, Bosch imagined a utopia that would restore the grandeur of the lost world. As the people of Earth once relied on Polaris to help them navigate the seas, the North Star would become the spiritual and political compass for Terrans of the new era. Bosch's message had a profound impact on the so-called lost generation, born during the post-war reconstruction. The Neo-Terran Front provided the youth of Polaris, Regulus, and Sirius with a cause to fight and die for. Bosch succeeded because his pro-Terran ideology was explicitly anti-Vasedan. The NTF opposed any Terran-Vasedan alliance and called for the dissolution of the GTVA. The NTF core systems had suffered political and economic chaos throughout the post-war reconstruction. The Vasedans' miraculous recovery under Khonsu II's leadership embittered those Terrans still struggling to rebuild their own systems. Bosch exploited this anti-Vasedan sentiment to achieve his own political ends. The Vasedans are a civilization of philosophers, artists, and scholars. They immerse themselves in the teachings of those who came before them, perceiving history not as a linear chronology of events but as a space inhabited by both the living and the dead. To the Terran outsider, Vasedan society appears convoluted and ritualistic. The Vasedans themselves may seem arrogant, treacherous, and superstitious. On the other hand, Vasedans tend to view Terrans as aggressive, paranoid, and stupid. 30 years of peaceful interaction between Terrans and Vasedans has helped to deconstruct these stereotypes. The crowning achievement of the Vasedan civilization is its language. For the average Terran, the formalities governing its usage are beyond comprehension. Syntax and vocabulary are dictated by such factors as the speaker's age, rank, and caste, the time of day and the phase of the Vasedan calendar, and the relative spatial position of the speaker to the emperor. This is further compounded by the existence of several alphabets, dozens of verb tenses, and thousands of dialects. A translation device is standard on all GTVA communications systems, enabling Terrans and Vasedans to understand each other. Because the Vasedan homeworld was primarily desert, the Terrans used Egyptian names to designate Vasedan warships during the Terran-Vasedan War and the Great War. After the defeat of the Shivans, the Vasedans insisted on maintaining this convention. The emperor strongly identified with the history of ancient Egypt, particularly the longevity of its civilization. Following their emperor's example, Vasedans will take on what they call a Terran name from the myths and history of ancient Egypt. The dark side of the Vasedan obsession with history was the emergence during the Great War of Hammer of Light, HAL, a cult that gained a strong following among the PVN, resulting in defections to the HAL cause. The Hall believed the Shivans were the cosmic redeemers and destroyers predicted in obscure prophecies written thousands of years ago. Following the destruction of the Lucifer, the ideology and activities of Hammer of Light shifted. While some followers committed ritual suicide, the military branch of the movement continued their armed opposition to the Vasudan government and its alliance with the Terrans. Though they continued to espouse Hall's religious dogma, their activities turned more toward acts of terrorism and guerrilla warfare. This branch of the Hall was later crushed in Operation Templar, following the Hall's kidnapping of the Vasudan Admiralty. Other Hall leaders vanished into obscurity, returning to the study of arcane texts. A number of these religious leaders were apprehended and imprisoned for their role in the insurgency, though a few are still in hiding. 32 years after the Great War, we still know almost nothing about the Shivans. Physically, the Shivans have multiple, compound eyes and 5 legs with claw-like manipulators. Their insect-like carapace does not appear original to the creature's physiognomy, suggesting the Shivans are a cybernetic fusion of biology and technology. The integrated plasma weapon also exhibits properties of an organic-artificial fusion. The weapon may be a kind of focusing device powered by the energy of the being itself, though this point is the subject of heated controversy. These details are cited as evidence that the Shivans could not have evolved as the Terran or Vasudan species had, but that they were likely constructed by another entity. Only a handful of Shivans have ever been captured, and all research on live specimens ended with the Gdi's Hades Rebellion in 2335. The results of these studies remain highly classified. Though the Shivans are obviously xenocidal, their motives and origins have yet to be determined. According to ancient artifacts, the Shivans seem to possess some kind of sensitivity to subspace disturbances. We do not know if the Shivans returned to this corner of the galaxy by chance, by cycle or pattern, or by their detection of Terran Vasudan subspace travel. Xenobiologists know very little about Shivan society. A leading hypothesis is the hive mind theory, arguing that Shivan society is broken down in specialized functions driven by a collective intelligence. The most convincing evidence supporting this theory is the behavior of Shivan forces following the destruction of the Lucifer, the turning point of the Great War. Other experts caution against attributing insectoid properties to the Shivans, regardless of their appearance and behavior. Shivan communication seems to occur in the electromagnetic spectrum, though efforts to decode their transmissions have yielded no meaningful results to date. During the Great War, as the annihilation of Earth seemed imminent, Vasudan scientists discovered the ruins of an extinct civilization we now call the Ancients. Data excavated at the site enabled the Allies to track and destroy the SD Lucifer in subspace. After the Great War, scientists uncovered more sites throughout Terran Vasudan space. Though only fragments remain, this interstellar society thrived thousands of years ago. Their empire was more expansive than the current boundaries of known space, and archaeologists believe they might eventually uncover a map of the ancient nodes, enabling the Alliance to travel to systems previously uncharted. There is virtually no visual record of this civilization, except hieroglyphic forms discovered at the archaeological sites and a handful of technological schematics. Major excavations are underway in Altair, Aldebaran, and Deneb, but the data gathered there remains classified at the highest level. Terran archaeologists use a Minoan naming convention to identify sites and major artifacts. Current evidence suggests the Shivans exterminated this civilization over 8,000 years ago. The ancients believed the Shivans were a race of cosmic destroyers, and that the extinction of their species was an act of retribution for striving beyond their ordained place in the cosmic order. In simple terms, subspace is an n-dimensional tunnel between one point in the universe and another. A vessel can travel through this tunnel in a matter of minutes, making a journey that might otherwise take decades or even centuries at light speed. A jump drive causes a ship to vibrate in multiple dimensions until its modulations are in perfect synchronization with the subspace continuum. A vortex opens, creating an aperture from an infinitesimally small point in the cosmos, enabling the vessel to cross the subspace threshold. Two types of jumps are possible. First, an intrasystem jump can occur between 2 points in a star system. Most small, spacefaring vessels are equipped with motivators capable of these short jumps. The presence of an intense gravitational field is required, prohibiting travel beyond the boundaries of a star system. Second, ships can jump from system to system via nodes. Until the Great War, only larger ships could generate sufficient power to use jump nodes. The development of jump drives for fighters and bombers in 2335 enabled the Alliance to destroy the SD Lucifer in subspace. Producing these small jump drives is prohibitively expensive, so they are restricted to missions that require pilots to travel between systems. The head-up display indicates the location of jump nodes with a green sphere. The vast majority of subspace nodes are extremely unstable, forming and dissipating in nanoseconds. Other nodes have a longer lifespan, existing for centuries or millennia before collapsing. The jump nodes sanctioned by the GTVA for interstellar travel are expected to remain stable for many years.